in an hour, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome to Stuck in My Mind podcast, the show where we dive into the mind of a regular guy on his road to self-discovery. You'll hear everyday people just like you share the latest topics, personal stories, and things they've learned along the way. And now, please welcome your host, Wise.
And welcome to another episode. I am your host, WIZE, and I have a very special guest. He's a songwriter, entrepreneur, photographer, author. He has over 40 years of music experience. Welcome to the show, Dave Combs. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Wise. How are you today?
I am blessed, man. I'm here doing what I love to do. I get to do my podcast and get to speak to amazing people like yourself. So it's always a blessing when I get to do that.
Well, it's a blessing to get to talk with you. I've been looking forward to this all day.
All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so how and when did you write your first song?
I was, believe this or not, I was 33 years old, almost 34 years old before I wrote my first song. Now, I grew up in music all my life. And I guess you can probably appreciate this when you're up around creative people doing creative things all your life. And, you know, my mother and father both played the piano. My grandparents did. Of course, I went to people at church were great musicians. And I was a choir director part-time when I was in college to help earn my way through college. And so I was around music and creating music that other people had written or composed most of my life. And the strange thing to me was that I could never remember anybody in my music teachers or any of my teachers of any kind telling me that you, Dave Combs, you could write some music. You could write a song. I'd never heard those words told to me ever in my life. Well, when I was 33 years old, I was sitting at my piano one evening doing what I like to do when I get home from work, to sit down at the piano and relax. You know how you do whether you pick up your guitar and you just strum and play something, or you sit down at the piano and play something. That's my way of relaxing. Well, this one particular evening in January of 1981, that's 41 years ago, I sat down at my piano and I started playing this song. And it was not a song that I had the sheet music for, that I'd ever heard before, or it just was a song that sounded to me like it would have been there forever. But I was playing just what came to me as I played the piano. And looking back on it, I think it was a song that was inspired and gifted to me. It just came through me to the piano and I played it. It was one of those creative moments that you look back on, and the song never changed. I mean, I played it from the beginning to the end the same way it is today in terms of the structure of the melody. But I never thought of it as writing a song. And then a couple of days later, my wife came home from work. I got home before she did, and I was playing the piano. And then she says, "Well, what's the name of this song? I've had it humming in my head all day long." You know, here you get like it's stuck in my mind like the name of your
Yeah.
podcast. You know, I guess they call it an earworm. But she says, "What's the name of this?" And I said, "Well, Linda, it doesn't have a name. It's just something I made up." And she got all excited and said, "Wow, you made that up?" Yeah, yeah. Well, she says, "Have you written it down?" "No, I've got it up here in my mind. It's not going anywhere." And she said, "No, you better write that down. Something might happen to you, and that song would be gone forever." So I said, "Okay." So I wrote it down, the melody and the chords on a piece of paper, and stuck it in the piano bench. And I still played the song every now and then for friends and family and just for enjoyment. And then it didn't have a name. Linda and I thought, well, that's a pretty song. We got to come up with a pretty name for that. We thought, nothing ever fit. Well, roll the calendar forward a couple of years. Some good friends of ours had a little baby girl named Rachel, and they asked me and Linda to be her godparents, which of course we were happy to do. And it was at her christening service. Linda and I were sitting there in the back of the church watching all the preacher say all of his wonderful words about little Rachel and everything. And at the end of the formal part of the service, I looked over at Linda and I said, what about now? What if I played this little song that I've written? What if I played it now? Because up at the front of the church was a beautiful grand piano, kind of like the one you see over my shoulder in the front of the church. And I thought, well, that's a perfect time. So she said, okay. So I went up to the family and the minister. I said, I've got this little tune that I'd love to play on that piano, if that would be okay. Okay. So everybody sat back down and I went over to the piano and sat down and started playing this tune. Well, I got halfway through it and I hear all the sniffling in the crowd, and, you know, there was a lot of emotion. I could feel it myself. I was, you know, getting some tears in my eyes. It was really a emotion-packed time. And when I finished playing the song and the last notes of the song were dying away on the piano, I looked up and over at little Rachel being held in the arms of her mother. And I said, from now on, this song will be called Rachel's Song in her honor. And why is that was that, I mean, it was just like that. It was meant to be. The marriage of the song and the name were just perfect. So that's how it got written, and that's how it got its name.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, to really just have it come to you and you not know it, and then good thing your wife had you write it down.
It is, isn't it? You know, I have a lot of things in my life that I have to attribute to my wife prodding me along to do the right thing.
Oh yeah, I'm blessed with that. My wife realized that this is something I love to do, and she's just very supportive. She encouraged me to record it, and it's good to have that support, to have someone who believes in you and sees the vision that you saw.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So you've been doing music for over 40 years.
Yes.
And like you said, you come from a musical family. Everybody you were around was musical. And you come with you create this song. After you dedicate it to Rachel, what happens after that?
Well, I had a decision to make as to what to do with this song that we now called Rachel's Song. And we weren't sure, Linda and I, exactly what to do with it. And I was working still for AT&T, Western Electric at the time, which became AT&T in 1984. And Linda said, and I was having to do a lot of traveling. I was think of it as an internal consultant within the company. I was traveling to the factories to implement new software to run the factories. One of the factories that I was working at and spending all day, weeks long at, was in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, as you know, Nashville, Tennessee goes by the nickname of Music City, USA, and it earns that title. So Linda said, another one of Linda's ideas, she says, why don't you go to find a studio and a musician and get a demo recording made of Rachel's Song? I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. So on my next trip to Nashville, went around one evening after work, driving over into the part of Nashville called Music Square, where they have studios and everything musical. You've probably been there. It's ASCAP and BMI headquarters, and it must be hundreds of recording studios, RCA and all those. And so I was driving around about 6 or so at night looking for a studio that would be open, that I could talk to somebody. And as they say down south here, we say, well, they rolled up the sidewalks at 5:30. Everybody went home. So it looked like everything was closed. But I rounded the corner down this Roy Acuff place, is the name of the street. And down at the end was a barn-like looking building with a water wheel out front. It was a mock-up of an old, water mill, water wheel. And on the sign on the side of the building, it said, the Music Mill. I said, well, that's encouraging. So I rounded the corner, pulled in the parking lot, and looked in there through the door, and there was a man sitting at a desk. And I thought, okay. Went up to the door, knocked on it, and he came to the door, unlocked it, and opened it and said, hello, I'm George Clinton. Can I help you? And I said, yes, sir. I'm Dave Combs, and I am looking for a studio. He said, well, come on in. And I looked around the room where I had just entered, and up on the left was a huge life-size picture of Glenn Campbell. And here's a great big panorama picture of the group Alabama. And there's the Forrester sisters, and then it's surrounded by gold records and platinum records and all kinds of, famous stuff. And I thought to myself, wow, this is amazing. I said, and George said, well, Dave, you're in a studio. This is a studio in Nashville. So I'd never been in one. I didn't know anything about the music business or recording or anything. He took me on a tour of the place. There just happened to be nobody recording that night at that time. So I got to see Studio A, the big room, and he took me into the control room where the engineers work with the big console. You've seen those with the, the thing looks about 8 feet long with sliders and switches and lights. And I thought this looked like you could launch a spaceship from in there. And so I was really impressed. And I said, well, George, I've got this little song I've written called Rachel's Song, and I need a demo recording made of it. How much would a studio like this rent for? And he said, well, this one is $125 an hour plus engineer. And now remember, this was 1986. So $125 an hour back in 1986 was a lot of money. And so I thought, that's kind of steep. And he said, well, don't worry about it. He said, the guy that owns this studio owns a little one across the street. It's in a former rent house, and it's $15 an hour. I said, well, I can afford that. That's more my speed. So anyway, after the tour, and I told George, I said, I need somebody that can play the song for me, a good piano player, a good musician. And he said, well, I know just the person. He said, let me go look up his phone number for you. His name is Gary Prim. He said, I go to church with him. We're good friends. He's a wonderful musician, highly thought of in Nashville. And so he looked up his phone number, wrote it on a piece of paper, and gave it to me. So I'm all set now. So I go back to my hotel, and I called the number and called Gary Prim. Got his answering machine, and he called me back in about 30 minutes. And he says, hello, this is Gary Prim. Can I help you? And I told him what I needed, a demo of Rachel's song recorded. And I said, can you do that for me? And he said, well, sure, I can do that. Just send me a tape recording of you playing it, so I'll know what it kind of sounds like. And then you send me the lead sheet for the song. And I said, fine, but what's a lead sheet? I was showing my lack of my ignorance of the music business. And he said, oh, it's just the melody and the chords written on a piece of paper. And I said, oh, well, I got that. I just didn't know what to call it. So I got back home after that trip and sent Gary the lead sheet and the recording of me playing it. And we lined up a studio a couple of weeks later. And on August the 22nd, 1986, I'll never will forget it, at 6 o'clock, I meet Gary Prim in person for the first time at this little studio. And he comes in carrying his synthesizer under his arm. It's a Yamaha DX7. For your music friends, they'll probably remember that one. It was kind of one of the premier synthesizers of that time. And so I met Gary. They had a little baby grand piano in this studio. It was a Yamaha. And it turned out, I found out later, this was the first Yamaha piano that Yamaha in Japan ever shipped to Nashville, Tennessee. So this piano had some history. And I've often dreamed about, I wonder if Floyd Kramer ever played this piano. I wonder if Elvis Presley ever played this piano. And I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't, because I don't know where that piano was before it was in this little building, but it was somewhere in Nashville. So anyway, Gary sits down at the piano and he starts playing my song. Now I'm back in the control room with the engineer, and he's ready to record. And we push record on the machine, and Gary starts playing Rachel's song. And he gets about halfway through it, and he stops and he says, Three. The engineer's nickname was Three. $3 was his nickname, and that's another whole story. But he says, Three, just stop it. And I got to do that over. So we rewound the tape and pushed record again, and Gary plays Rachel's song all the way through. Now, these session musicians, as you probably are aware, in New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Nashville, all these places, they are really, really good at nailing a song. I mean, they can play something and just go right through it without making mistakes. Second time through, Gary played it perfectly. And I just cannot believe my ears. Now, the only time I'd ever heard my song was me playing it. And here I have a professional musician playing my song in as good a quality that I've ever heard on, even on a radio anywhere. And so I am blown away. Well, Gary finishes the piano part. And then he says, well, now what I want to do is I'd like to double the piano part with an electric piano sound. And I'll do that on my synthesizer. So we set up his synthesizer in front of him, and he puts on the headphones like you got on there. And so he can hear the piano part himself. And then he plays along with himself on two more tracks for the electric piano. And I couldn't believe that. He was so precise in his playing of the electric piano part that you could not tell that they were not played at the same time. Now, in musical lingo, we call that a recording that is tight. It is the notes are just precisely right on top. But these two musicians playing the same thing tight. They're right together. Well, he did that, added the electric piano part, which gave it some fullness. You know, you add the electric on top of the piano, it really gives it a kind of a unique fullness. And then Gary says, well, I think we need to add some strings to fill this thing out a little bit. So he said, let's do some high strings. So we changed the sound on the synthesizer to strings and rewound the tape and record some, and he fills in just in the right places, not through the whole thing, the string part on the high part. He said, now I think it needs some bottom, so let's put in some low strings. So we did the thing again, put two more tracks with low strings and recorded that in the right places. And then in his arrangement of my song, I always played it just in the key of C. And his arrangement, he played the verse and chorus twice in the key of C. And he did something very dramatic in my mind with the song. He did not modulate it with anything where you would expect it to change keys. He played up to the end of the second verse and then instantly went to the key of D flat, up a half a step, which really kind of emotionally and musically and sound-wise really brings you up a level. You know, it's up a half step, but it's really, it raises your attention level and the energy of the song. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And he said, I need to add some horns in there just to help it get from this side to that side. And so he put some horn sounds in there. And we got all that done. And then he says, I think that's it. I said, I'm amazed. This is just wonderful. So he packed up his synthesizer. I paid him his money that we'd agreed upon, and he left. And then the engineer was left to mix it down to 2-track stereo and make me some cassette tapes and my master tape, and we're all done. And I'm just blown away. You know, I wish I could relive that moment over and over and over, because I remember the energy and the excitement and the overwhelming feeling that something great had just happened. And so I took my cassette tape and jumped in my rental car, popped that cassette tape in the player in the car and turned it up and sat there in the parking lot and listened to it again. And then I said, well, I better get back to the hotel. So I made my way on the interstate back towards the hotel. And I'd play that song and rewind it and play it again, rewind it and play it again. Now, the song's 3 minutes and 45 seconds long. And so I don't know how many times I played it, but I do know that I missed my exit to the airport. I guess my mind was somewhere, something was stuck in my mind besides getting directions to the airport where my hotel was. I had circled Nashville about twice. There, you know, if you've been to Nashville, there's a loop around the town, and there's 3 interstates that collide there in Nashville. And if you don't get in the correct lane, you're going someplace else than where you need to be. So I finally did make it back to the hotel, and I called my wife, immediately called Linda. And I was so excited. She probably thought I had stopped and got at the local bar and got myself all snookered up. But I was so excited, probably talking 100 miles an hour. And I didn't have any way to play it for her. I had no cassette player, no way to play it. There was no iPhone. This was 1986. There was no cell phone, none of that.
None of that. Well,
so I basically told her about what was going to happen or what it sounded like. And she couldn't wait for me to get home and play it for her. Well, I was still so excited and on cloud nine that I said, I got to play this for somebody. I'm going to corner somebody and play it for them. So I went down to the local Circuit City store, which is an electronics store. I don't think they're in business anymore, but
Nope,
they're
no longer
no, they were like the Best Buy, I think, of
at that
today.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, but they sold high end, really good stereo equipment, and I knew they'd have a good way to play it. So I went in the store and I found the salesperson, and I was pretending like I was going to be buying some stereo equipment, I guess. And I said, "Could you demonstrate something of your cassette players for me, and let me know what your big sound systems sound like?" And I said, "How about play this cassette tape on it?" And I gave him the cassette, and we went over, and he put it on his most expensive system he had there. And I said, "When I turn it up, I want to hear this thing." And so he did, and he turned, and it just filled up the store with sound. I mean, and the customers in the store, as soon as that song started playing, everybody just stopped and went, "What is that that's being played?" Well, then's when I also realized more than I already did about that this song has some real power and ability to really catch people's attention and grab them. And so, so that was how I forced the music on the Circuit City folks. But anyway, everybody that I played it for after that, I mean, it just, they were really taken by it. I played it for a friend who had a radio program. He said, "You got to let me play it on the radio." I said, "Well, okay." And I gave him my master tape to take to the radio station, played it on the radio that next Saturday. And then the radio station manager called me and he said, "Well, I've never had this happen before in my 20 some years in radio." He said, "When Bob played your song on the radio, our phones at the station lit up." He said, all the lines were busy. People calling in saying, "What is that music you just played? Can you play that again? Tell us more about this guy from Winston-Salem." And to play Rachel's song again. And he said, "I've never had this happen before." So that was another little thing, that a little red light that went off. It said, "Okay, this has really got to do something. There's something here." And that was the inspiration for getting it on more radio stations, which then I got busy and I worked my tail off calling program directors at radio stations all over the country. I got a hold of, I think it was called Radio and Records was the name of the publication. You could get a magazine from them, and it would have the phone numbers and listings of all the radio stations for every format in the whole country.
Okay.
And I looked up the easy listening stations, which we used to have. I think there may be 3 or 4 left in the whole country now, but back then there were about 400 of them. So I was going down calling them. I would call and talk to the program director, and I'd send them a copy of Rachel's song. They loved it. They put it on the air, and I started getting fan mail. People would hear the station. They had my address. They'd send me a letter and tell me how much they really enjoyed my music, and a lot of real touching letters about things that had happened with the music. So I said, well, I need to get it on all the radio stations in the country, and I can't, 400 is way too many, but I found out a little secret in the radio business was there were businesses that programmed radio stations. These were like syndicators that one guy would program 200 stations. He
Yep.
would send out the program, and it was Bonneville Broadcasting, I think the name of the company was. And I got a hold of the program director for easy listening stations. He said, well, I got about 200 stations that I program. And I sent him Rachel's song. He loved it. And so he put it in rotation on all of their Bonneville stations. And then my music really took off because it was all over the whole country. Everybody was listening to it. And then my mail started picking up again. So that was kind of the next step. And then the next step then was once I had the radio stations playing it, people wanted to buy my music. Well, the only way I had of selling it to them was one-on-one. They'd send me a check in the mail and I'd send them a CD or a cassette tape. And that's fine, except that, I'm only really touching a small part of the potential market out there. So my wife and I sit down and figure out, how can we get this music available to the masses? Record stores would not have anything to do with me. As you probably are aware, the big chain stores are only interested in people who are big promoted artists. It's like the big TV shows or even in the big box stores.
It's nothing like now. It's not now where you can really become successful as a musician by going viral.
Yeah, you can now.
It's no longer having to go sign to a major label, hope somebody discovers you.
Yeah, we cut out the middleman now.
Yeah,
I mean, you go straight to the consumer, and on YouTube or Spotify or iHeartRadio, all these places, you have a platform. And if you have a really good program like your podcast, if your podcast starts taking off, all it takes is to kind of a word of mouth and things start going viral. That's what it's all about. Well, back then, I didn't have the luxury of that. It was all either, you went with the record stores or you had to find some other way. Well, as luck would have it, this was in 1988 when I had my very first CD. The CD was of Rachel's song. It's this one here. And it had my first 7 songs that I'd ever written on it. And so I was working still at AT&T at the time in Bethesda, Maryland. And a lady that worked right behind me said that she had a really good friend who owned a gift shop in Old Town Alexandria called America. That was the name of the store. It was a shop that sold everything red, white, and blue. I mean, it was patriotic. They played John Philip Sousa music and sold flags and anything with the America theme on the products. And so she said, I want to give your Rachel's song CD to my friend Jane that owns this store. And I said, well, sure. And I gave her one. And so she gave it to Jane. And about 2 or 3 days later, my phone rings and it's Jane from the shop in America at Old Town. And she introduced herself to me and said, well, Dave, Leslie gave me your CD and I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to it, but I need some help. She says, every time your CD plays in my store, all the customers in the shop stop and come over to the counter and say, do you have that music? What is that music? Do you have it for sale? I want to take that home with me. I want to play it at home. And she said, well, no, I don't have it. But she was a very savvy business lady. She knew that if people wanted something, she's going to find a way to buy it and sell it to them. Your typical entrepreneur attitude, right? So she calls me and then she says, can you sell me some CDs at wholesale? And I said, sure. And I had never done any wholesale sales before. This was the first. So we reached an agreement on the wholesale price and, she's going to sell the CDs for probably $14, $15. And I think I sold it to her to him for $8, $7 or $8, something like that. And so that night I boxed up a box of CDs and cassette tapes, and my wife Linda and I, we were living in Maryland. We went down to Old Town Alexandria and took Jane this box of music. And then we went out to dinner at a nice restaurant and came back home. I thought, well, this will be interesting. Well, about 3 or 4 days later, phone rings again and it's Jane. And Jane says, well, Dave, I need some more help. I said, you need to send me some more. And how about doubling the order this time? And I said, okay. So that night we boxed up another bigger box of CDs and tapes and took them to Jane. And, we made that trip to Alexandria every week for well over a year. She sold thousands of tapes and CDs out of that one little gift shop, which was just totally amazing because it was just one CD playing and all her customers would buy it. And she was probably selling, I don't know, 25, 30 CDs a week, maybe even more. I can't remember what the number was, but it was enough sales that if a record store sold that of any one album in their store, they would call it a smash hit because, that's just the way it works. So anyhow, that was my first business model of the commercial sales of Rachel's song, the CD, and how to get it sold to the consumers. And now I'm an MBA. I have my MBA from Wake Forest, and I'm a business person. I'm very analytical with a math major degree in physics. And so you can imagine I'm one of those geek folks, I guess you could call. But so I like to analyze things. Well, I took my data from Jane's store, put it in a spreadsheet. Now, this is before Excel even existed, but we did have a spreadsheet on my computer back then. I was a computer person. And so I made me a column that said the first column is Jane's store. I'm like, how many CDs did she sell? What I sell it to her for? What she sold it for? What it cost me? And the difference. And here's my gross profit down at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's how much she sold a week. And then if you times, 52 weeks a year, that's how much she sold and so forth. So I had really good numbers. And it wasn't just, a forecast. This was actual numbers that I knew she had sold. And I said, well, okay, what if there were one gift shop like Jane's in the country in every state? Just 50. I'll just take one out of every state. Surely to goodness, there's one. I made me a column. Column 2 is column 1 times 50. And you take the numbers and you look down at the bottom of gross profit. Well, now that's an interesting number. Okay. Well, what if there were just 5 gift shops in every state? 250 in the whole country to carry my music. Put that in column 3. Hey, Linda, come here. Look at this number. And that number was twice what I was making at AT&T. And then's when the light bulb went off really big time in my mind that said, okay, I know what we need to do now. We have got to replicate this one business model that works so well in Old Town Alexandria as many times as we can do it and as fast as we can. And that's how I started my entrepreneurial approach to my music business side of the thing. And, I ended up with a couple of 3 years later, I had over 1,000 gift shops across the country playing and selling my music. Me and 2 other musicians practically single-handedly created what they now call the play and sell market. It was a sales channel for music. Back then, everybody bought music in a record store. But I said, okay, we're going to create this play and sell channel. I did. And after I got my 1,000 gift shops playing and selling my music, the big distributors stood up and noticed that everywhere their salespeople went to try to sell their music, they ran into Dave Combs' music. And so they jumped on the bandwagon. So they it's like you get a good thing going, you better go with it as fast as you can, because once somebody discovers your market, man, they're going to go with it too. So, but anyway, that's how I got my music business started, selling my music. And that just made everything. And I was able to quit my job in 1992. I met with my boss and told him, and he already knew about what I was doing with my music, and he loved my music too. And he was very supportive. He was actually, he said, I'm kind of envious when I gave him my letter of resignation, told him what I was going to do. And he said, go for it, man. Just go for it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I that's why I do my podcast, is to have people come and share the story so that people can realize, hey, listen, no matter what, you're able to achieve some great things if you work hard to it, you apply yourself to it, and you find what you truly love. Like, this music just came to you, this song just came to you. But that's because you was ready to receive that message and play it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's just the things that have happened since then in terms of the lives touched. I eventually heard from over 50,000 people about my music. I have boxes and boxes in my basement here of letters that are just super inspirational, very touching letters. And that's part of what caused me to write my book. I had all of these people that told me how they were touched by my music. And I said to Linda, she'd been telling me for years that I needed to get off my duff and go write my book, because people had been telling me you need to put these stories down in writing. Well, last year, or 2 years ago, I guess, it's hard to believe it's been 2 years, the pandemic's been around.
Yeah.
But I decided my time at home with this pandemic, I'm going to write my book. So I spent about 9 months sitting at my computer, taking all these stories and it was fun to go back and reminisce and bring up all these incidents and people you've run across and people that were so helpful to you, and even those that weren't helpful, they at least you found out what you didn't want to do. And so I got them all written down. It took me about 9 months to write my book, and then I published it last October, and it's been a really great success on Amazon. Along the way, I met my friend Jack Canfield, who was the co-author of the Chicken Soup for
The
the
Chicks for
Soul
the Soul,
books.
yes.
He
He's
is
one of my favorite authors. Yes, he's
and he's one of my favorite people in the world. And he and I have become fast friends. And he loves Rachel's song. And when I approached him about writing the forward to my book, he said, "Well, you get it written, and I'll take a look at it and see." And then once he read my book, he said, I'm writing the forward to your book." So I was so honored to have the person who's probably sold more nonfiction books than anybody ever. He's over 700 million copies of his books that he's either authored or co-authored. And he wrote the book, The Success Principles. And you may have seen that book. It's like a PhD in business in a book. It is amazing. So I get a big plug out for my friend Jack Canfield. He is amazing, and I so appreciate his support. And writing the book was a big challenge. What to put in it, what not to. Writing a book. If any of your people are listeners and want to be authors, that's another whole subject that you can talk about for hours. Is how do you write a book? How do you publish a book?
So me and my nephew were partners, and we have our production company. We have an internet radio station. I have my podcast. He has his podcast. We're about to launch a podcast together. But one of the things we did together was he was already a published author, but that first book was really he just threw it out there. He didn't really. But we did his second book, and we just got it published and released this year, the beginning of this year. And so it was just it was just something for us to. So he just talks about his life. Yeah, he went to prison. It was a message, a letter to his son, and he just completely turned his life around. So for him to be able to share his story,
wow,
and me being able to help him share his story and put that message out, it's been great. And it all stems from us just taking the risk and doing the podcast and doing the YouTube and doing something that we normally didn't do. This is like he's a painter. I'm a table games dealer. None of us will ever have a background in radio or podcasting or none of that, but we found our purpose, and it's to help people get through whatever they have to get through.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. You don't have to be, like in my case, I am not a Juilliard trained musician. Now, I have lots of friends who are, and I totally are blown away by their skill and ability, and I love to hear them play music. And I'm not a trained composer. I took piano lessons as a kid. I've self-taught pretty much how to play my playing the piano. Self-taught of music theory and that kind of thing. I love the theory and the music, and I love jazz music as well. I wish I could play jazz music, but I am not a jazz musician. I just am a jazz music appreciator. But those skills and the ability of those musicians to create and improvise on the fly, the fantastic music just is amazing to me. But I love music, and I am so grateful that not only did I have a little simple song. When you break down Rachel's song and look at the basic music that I wrote to start with, it is one of the simplest tunes you ever saw. I mean, it's not a lot of fancy chords, not a lot of fancy notes or anything. It's very simple. But I did learn that the simple things in life and the simple music can have as much power as something that's very, very complicated or complex. And so I am just blessed that not only did I have the music in me, I was blessed to be surrounded by people who could take what I have, like Gary Prim, and take this little small thing and make it into a marvelous creation that people absolutely loved. And I think that's the thing that that I get out of this that I'd like to pass on to all the people that listen that are creative and whatever. You don't have to do it by yourself. In fact, if you try to do everything by yourself, you're probably not going to succeed. What you need to do is surround yourself with people who are positive supporters of what you do, people who have skills that complement what you have, and keep adding to that cadre of people that are around you. Then the team of you, the team of writing a book, the team of producing your music, or the team of producing your podcast, of how do you spread the word, and how do you make this thing go 10 times what it is right now. Don't think double, think 10x. And surround yourself with people like that. That's the secret sauce, I think, to success.
It is. You have to surround them. If you're the smartest person in the room, there's a problem. It is. So you need to surround yourself with people who are where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's being able to network with some great podcasters and learn and pick their brains and see what they do that helps them generate the audience that they get.
Right.
And I've been blessed that the podcasting community is very helpful. We're not, it's not like, oh, you're my competition. No, it's nothing like that. Everyone here in this community is about helping each other out and growing and building, because not everyone is in the same niche. Everybody's got different things. There's true crime podcasts. There's celebrity
there's only about 3-point-something million podcasts out there.
There is. It's crazy because a couple of years ago it was less than 1 million.
Yeah.
And now it's exploded. But people are consuming more and more podcasts. Like, there's so many different platforms. I'm on so many different platforms with my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And there's platforms I'd never heard of that I'm on because I have a great team. I have a partner. She knows all of them. So she's the one who does all the marketing, she does all the promotion. She finds where we're not, what platforms we're not on, and make sure we get put on them. So, like you said, it's always good to have people that know things that you don't know.
Yeah.
That's the way to grow.
You know, the barrier between you and your audience now is practically zero. I mean, anybody with a laptop or a phone, access to the internet, anywhere in the world, can instantly be connected one-on-one with you and your message. And there's no middleman at all. And hopefully nobody, like Facebook tends to want to do, to tell me which of my friends get my posts. Now that always irritates the heck out of me.
And it's ridiculous. they want you to pay them to boost your posts to your own friends.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It is. Yeah, and it's like like I have over 1,000 something friends, and none of them, and probably 100 of them probably see my.
Yeah, me too. I've got I think 9. I may have 1,000 by now, but it's right at 1,000. And when I do a post, I may hear from 25 people, and I just know that they pushed it out to just a handful, and I don't know who are they to decide which of my friends I want to communicate with.
Yeah,
go figure.
Yep.
Anyhow, well, I'm just fortunate that I have many outlets of ways to get my music out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on. I have my Facebook. I have, on YouTube. I have lots of YouTube videos. We haven't even talked about the video aspect of it, but I'm a photographer. I love to take pictures. I've taken probably, 60, 70,000 photos since I got my digital camera a few years ago. But I love landscape photography. I love close-ups of flowers. I love anything with a lot of color and just great photographs. I like realistic figures. And so I've married my photography with my music, and I've created music videos with my photography and my music. And in fact, during the pandemic, I created 4 videos that will play over 6 hours long. And what I did was I took one of my albums, and then I took photography to go with it. And as a song would play, I'd put a picture up on the screen, and it'd go to the next song, another picture, and it'd do this. And then I looped it again, and I looped it so that it played over 6 hours. And the reason I did that, where I wanted it played was in nursing homes and assisted living facilities because the staff there were overwhelmed with trying to keep up with all this stuff with COVID. The residents were really stressed out. They were in their rooms. They couldn't go out. They had if you turn on the TV, it was nothing but depression, listening to the bad news of the COVID. I said, I got to do something. So I created these soft, soothing, relaxing videos that when they play them in the nursing homes, they're listening to pretty music. They're watching beautiful photography that they can, in their mind, they can go there and be, the stress level just comes down and down and down. And so I did that, but I was able to get my YouTube videos distributed to all 45,000 nursing homes and assisted living facilities in the country through the associations that deal with all of those nursing homes. I personally called over 200 in North Carolina just to see if it would be something they'd want. And I talked to the activities director myself, and I would ask them, would this be helpful to you? Yes, it would. Well, I sent them the link to the YouTube, and I got letters and emails back from them thanking me for how much it really meant to them. So I spent probably about 2 months when this first hit with all the bad news stories about the nursing homes and how bad off they were. I spent 2 months doing this, and I was so happy that finally I did accomplish getting my music and videos into those facilities, those that could use it. And so that was one of the things I did during the pandemic.
Yeah. And that's great. It's amazing because actually I actually sat down with a real good friend of mine. She was working in a nursing home in New York City at the time of the pandemic, and some of the stories she would tell us and that she talked about was crazy. And so for you to do what you did, especially during that time, that's amazing because, like you said, that music has a way to soothe and heal people.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like your music put people into these trances that give them energy and helps them heal themselves and find some comfort listening to your music.
Yeah, I really am blessed that that's the case, and I knew that anecdotally from the letters that I had gotten from people, how much that it gave them peace and it reduced their stress level. But and there's plenty of medical study. You can Google research articles on music and its effect on the healing in the body. There's lots of research on it, but I didn't need the research to know what I already knew in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Dave, has been great having you on. Now is the time for you to plug away, let everybody know where they can find the music, find your book, your website, everything.
Well, I've tried to keep it really simple. I decided I didn't want to have people go clicking and clicking and clicking and try to find me. You go to one place, and that is to my website, and it's very simple. It's Combs Music, COMBS music.com. And I have a very simple landing page there. When you go to my website, you'll see my book cover like you see over my shoulder here on the left side of the screen when you go there. And on the right side of the screen, you'll see my Rachel Song CD. And in the middle of the screen, there's a little button that says Play Rachel's Song. So if you want to hear Rachel's song in its entirety, this is not a sample. This is the whole thing in high quality. Click there, and you can listen to, on your laptop or phone, Rachel's song play for you. And then there are links underneath the book and the CD that you can click and go to Amazon and buy the book, or you can go to Amazon and buy the CD. And then there are links at the top if you want to, do a little research about me and listen to some of my podcast interviews. And there's even an interview that Jack Canfield did of me when you go to my interview tab. So you can listen to me and Jack Canfield talk. But one funny thing, if you go and buy my book, now my book is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle as an ebook and as an audio book. I spent about 30 hours here in my studio recording the narration of my book. So if you want to listen to
it's you who's reading your book.
I am narrating my book. If you want to listen to an East Tennessee boy talk about his book for 8 hours, just go buy my audio book and you can hear me read my book to you. So So anyway, there's lots of ways you can get it, and there's printed sheet music for piano players that want to play my music. One of the first things I had to create was the sheet music to Rachel's song. All these piano players said, "Man, I love that song. I want to play that song." Well, I had to sit down and transcribe note for note what Gary had played on the piano. Now, this is before there were no MIDI files or electronic files of the music. I had to do it by ear.
Yeah.
I would listen to one measure of the music, write down some notes, play it back, and listen to it again. I did it measure by measure. It took me months to transcribe all that Gary had played on that album, but I got it, and it's note for note what Gary played. You can buy the sheet music to Rachel's song right off my website there, or go to Sheet Music Plus for those piano players who are familiar with that website. I have 185, I think it is, songs that are on sheet music on Sheet Music Plus. You can pay $4.99 and download it and print a PDF, and you're playing it right now, instantly available. So the sheet music is available as well. So you can check it all out from my website, and I invite you also to send me an email. I love to hear from people. Dave@combsmusic.com. I read them all and I answer them all. So let me hear from you and let me know your stories of how the music has touched you as well. So that's start at combsmusic.com, and there you go.
All right. It's going to definitely be in the description when I release this on YouTube. So definitely check them out, combsmusic.com. All right. So now it's time for shout-outs. Big shout out to the Real Wise fam, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Big shout out to the boss lady, Fina. Appreciate you, baby. Big shout out to Dave Combs for coming through and showing some love and sharing his story. And a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless y'all. Be safe. You know your boy Wise does it. Peace out.
Thanks for listening. Listen on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and TuneIn. Find us on social media on Twitter @wise_b_blunt, Instagram @wise_b_blunt, and a Facebook fan page, www.facebook.com/wise76. Check back soon for new episodes. Until next time, peace out.